Hello and welcome to Daniel Aramaic Fridays. And this is getting real now. As you may or may not know, I've studied Hebrew, I've taught Hebrew, but I've only dabbled in Aramaic, so this is wild stuff. All of a sudden, if you watched last week with Daniel 2:4, the book of Daniel just kind of strangely flips into Aramaic all of a sudden. It says, and they said to the king, Aramaic, and then it switches to Aramaic. And so we are now completely in the Aramaic portion of Daniel. So let's go ahead and begin with Daniel 2:5 today. Ane Malka, answering the king, the Amar, man, this is the second time in two verses that we've come across a form in the text that's messed up. Now, I suppose, and again, some of you may be actual experts, but I suppose this is a testament to the fact that the Masoretes, who are the main copyists of the Hebrew Bible in, say, the 900s, the Masoretes were very meticulous in copying the Hebrew text. Now, remember, this is well over 1,000 years after these texts were written. So we should not assume that the copyists of the text prior to Christ were nearly as meticulous as the Masoretes. Sometimes you'll hear people say, oh, how careful they were in copying the text. Well, that's true of the Masoretes, like 1,000 years after the text. I would say that the original text was actually quite fluid, probably, and it had much more of a living quality. But anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. But this form is messed up. In particularly, the yod and the aleph are switched around. And so we have set up what's called a kathiv kare. It's written one way, kathiv, but you say it another way, kare. So this is the way it's written, but it's not quite right, as we'll see in a second. So the yod and the aleph should actually be switched, but it means to the Chaldeans. Answering the king, or the king answering and saying to the Chaldeans, Mulata mani azda. Okay, what does this mean? The message, the decision from me is firm. Okay, so the king answering and saying to the Chaldeans, to the Babylonians, the decision from me is firm. Okay, so there's what that line says. Answering the king and saying to the Chaldeans, the decision from me firm. There's no is here. We have to supply it. Okay, now for some Aramaic grammar. So the verb ana is very well known in the Hebrew Bible. It's a high frequency word. But this is a participle. And it's a base stem participle. We can still say G or Grundstamm if we want across the Semitic languages. The word we might use in Aramaic is pa'al, the pa'al stem, we could say call stem if you want. But anyway, G stem, it's the unchanged basic stem of the word. And this is the participle. Now in Hebrew, this would be the way it would be. It would have a holum. Now the seri is the same, but it would have a holum there in Hebrew instead of the kamas. And what's going on here is very interesting. If you're a nerd like me, occasionally a nerd, what happened in Semitic languages is at a particular point, so we have these Semitic peoples before the Jews even exist, before Israel. Actually, I shouldn't say that with certainty, but let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and say it. Before Israel really emerges as a people, a distinct Semitic people, you have these Semites around, and what happens is there is a Canaanite shift. It sounds like a dance. Let's do the Canaanite shift. Anyway, in which an earlier long A, like this kamatz here, shifted into a long O. And so in Hebrew, wherever, well, not wherever, but in many cases, you will find a holum or a holum vav. This dot above is called a holum. It's a long O. And historically, if you go back in history, what we find is that that was originally a long A. And so we call this a historically long vowel. It is historically long. It's not going to ever stop, no matter, even if you're running out of breath because you're on Mars, you're going to have to do a long vowel here. It's historically long. What happens in other places in Hebrew is the vowel will reduce when you run out of air, but not with these. You're going to have to come up with the breath to say these long vowels. It's going to always be a holum in Hebrew, but in Aramaic it's still the original long A. So you have these two languages that are developing parallel to each other, and at some point they branched, right? They were at some point in the part of the same Semitic language, which is interesting. The Canaanites are actually Semitic peoples, it would seem. Sometimes you can get the impression, and this has played into some racism too in the past too, that the Canaanites are a different group, but they would be the same linguistic group from all we can tell. But so at some point you had a branch in this Semitic language, and you have the long A over here, but it becomes a long O in Hebrew. Anyway, I find that fun. It's the Canaanite shift. Okay, so this, whenever I put it in parentheses, I'm giving you the Hebrew, what it would be in Hebrew. So you can see very similar, but this is answering the king. We learned last week the kamatz aleph at the end is the in Aramaic, and saying, apparently Aramaic does this a lot, and apparently Aramaic Daniel does this a lot, and that is it begins with a participle. Hebrew doesn't do that, but this apparently is an Aramaic kind of thing to begin with these kinds of participles that set the stage. So this is actually a participle. There's the same kamatz. The aleph is different, and I mean the patak is different, short A. I can't explain it because I don't know that much yet about Aramaic. It's unusual, I think, that the patak. In Hebrew, it would be omer again. See, this is the way it would be in Hebrew, but in Aramaic, the long O of the participle is a long A, as it was originally in the history of the language. Okay, here's the kare. This is how it should be read. La kas da a, to Chaldeans. So this is what the king says to the Chaldeans, and you'll notice that the aleph and the yod should have been switched. But the Masoretes, it would seem, rather than fix it, decided to leave it the same. So we're having a testament to how careful the Masoretes were in copying. Again, I don't think this applies to the original, the original copyists, but it certainly applies over 1,000 years later when the Masoretes are copying. The decision, okay, again, kamatz aleph is the at the beginning. From me, so this is a shorter but very similar. This is the Hebrew memeni, memeni. The hierarch yod at the end is my, or me. Same in Aramaic and Hebrew. Very similar form, just there's a missing mem in the middle. Cut out the middleman, right? Is firm. Again, this matches. Decision is firm. These agree in their gender. They're both masculine. They agree in their number. They're both singular. And they agree in their definiteness. They both have a the on it. So decision from me, firm. All right. Man, this is involved. I'm enjoying it though. I feel a rush when I conquer something. Okay, so hein la, and this is a nightmare, so I'll have to gird up my loins to pronounce that one. But anyway, hene in Hebrew is behold. This is also hein, same word, but it seems to mean something like if. But I mean, you could translate it as behold, and it would still make some sense. Now, again, let's do the Canaanite shift. In Hebrew, lo with a long O, holum, is not. But in Aramaic, it's la, because Aramaic did not undergo the Canaanite shift. We're not going to do the Canaanite shift while we're Aramaic people. So la means not. So behold, not, okay, girding up my loins, taho da'u na ni. Taho da'u na ni. Okay, well, this looks horrible. And if you're in the beginning of the Hebrew game, you think, oh, that looks horrific. What is that thing? But the bigger they are, the harder they fall. What can we recognize about this, even just from knowing Hebrew? Well, I see a t on the front, and I see an u in the middle. Let me go ahead and bring up my, so lo is the Hebrew for that. So the t on the front and the u in Hebrew would have me thinking second masculine plural. Y'all, so it's a y'all. And it's very much the same in Aramaic, except we have a nun at the end. So it's a t on the front and an un instead of just an u at the end. So very similar in Aramaic. The Hirik yod is me, cause me to know, same as in Hebrew. The hey is in Hebrew, it would be the hifil. In Aramaic, we're going to call it the hafel, but or you can call it an H stem. Whether we're in Hebrew or Aramaic, you can still call it an H stem because the causative stem adds an H. So that's where the word cause comes from. So if not, y'all, cause me to know. So the y'all comes from the tav and the u and the nun. The cause comes from the hey. The me comes from the ni, and no comes from yada. Same verb as in Hebrew, yada. And typically, first yod verbs are a little bit weak, and they go to a vav in the middle of things, especially in the hifil, in the H stem. Okay, so again, we were able to pull that out of a mess. That's a mess, but we were able to come up with it. So the basic stem in Hebrew would be yada with two kamats, but in Aramaic it's yada. So here's another difference between Aramaic and Hebrew. The near open syllable, that is the syllable previous to the accent, if it doesn't close, if it's an open syllable, so that's consonant vowel, that's an open syllable. In Hebrew, a near open syllable tends to lengthen. But in Aramaic, a near open syllable tends to downgrade or reduce. And so whereas in Hebrew, this would be yada with two kamats, in Aramaic, this near open syllable, ya, reduces to da. And so, we call, like I was saying, the G stem of this is the p-all stem, but we can call it G, we can call it call, so we don't get confused if you want. But this particular form is the verb. So in Hebrew it's hifil, in Aramaic it's the hafel. Okay, we'll get these things by practice. Again, if not, you cause me to know the dream. Helma. Kamat's aleph is again the dream. Pish re. This is called a mapik, and in a final hay it says, I'm a real hay. Other hays at the end, like this hay, is actually just nothing. It's not even it's not a consonant. It's a piggyback for a vowel. It's open. But sometimes the hay is real, and here it means it's. So pish rea. Pashar, if you know much about the New Testament studies, you may have heard of Pesher interpretation. Pesher interpretation is a kind of interpretation we associate with the commentaries from the Dead Sea Scroll. They kind of go like this. Here's the text, interpretation. Here's what it means, pesher. And so pesher is it is a Hebrew word, but it's a loan word from Aramaic, because in Hebrew it's patar. And here we're learning a lot of little things about how Aramaic's different from Hebrew. So do you remember that story about shibboleth and how some of them said thibboleth? Between the Semitic languages, you have these slight consonantal differences. So whereas Hebrew would normally have a tav in this word, Aramaic has a sheen. Instead of th, it's sh. And so this gets at the very heart of the Thibboleth people, because the Thibboleth people were Canaanites who did not say sh as in pashar. They said pathar. And so that's where the whole shibboleth thing in Judges comes from. And of course, Gideon kills the ones who can't say shibboleth. Those that say thibboleth are immediately killed. But anyway, another interesting consonantal shift between Aramaic and Hebrew. Hadamim, basically, if you don't tell me what this dream means, I'm going to cut you. You're going to be in pieces. And so the Hirik Yod Nun is the masculine plural ending. It's im in Hebrew. Hirik Yod Mem is the masculine plural in Hebrew. In Aramaic, it's Hirik Yod Nun, in. Okay, so I shall dash them to pieces. Okay, now my picture's in the way. Let me move it down a little bit. Okay, so now as we get to the final part of this verse, we have another long one, tit avdun. Tit avdun. Now, this tit on the front has me thinking of the Hebrew hithpael. And indeed, that's what we have here. We'll call it the hithpael, or it's the equivalent of the HTD stem in Hebrew, a reflexive stem in Hebrew. Here it has a kind of passive quality. You will be cut. The un at the end, so the tav on the front and the un on the end is again that second masculine plural. Y'all gonna be cut. And then avad is the cut bit in the middle there. So here you can see that the stems in Aramaic are very much like the stems in Hebrew. And your houses, ubatekun, the kun is y'all's or your. It would be kem in Hebrew. So you notice that Aramaic likes the nun and Hebrew likes the mem. So Hebrew likes but Aramaic likes n. So Aramaic likes nuns. Aramaic nuns. Okay. So, and then bait or bayit is house. Bayit is house in Hebrew. Bayit is house in Aramaic. And then the yod is an indication of the plural, houses. So we have and with the sharuk. We have bait, which is house. We have the yod, which tells me it's plural. And we have kon that tells us it's y'all's houses. You will be cut into pieces, and your houses are going to be navali. They're going to be an outhouse. They're going to be a dung pile, a rubbish pile, is what I'm going to make your houses into. Your houses, a dung pile, yit samun, will be put. This is seem, which we know from Hebrew, so those two letters in the middle. The yod and the un are third masculine plural. So again, there's a very similar structure to Hebrew, except Aramaic likes nuns. And then this is also, also hithpael, because we have yit instead of tit here. And then the un is the same for y'all. Y'all will be put as a dung pile. All right, well, that's a lot of work, but we're getting to learn Aramaic, aren't we? And this has been Daniel 2:5 in our trek to learn Aramaic in Daniel.